Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/ask Reddit by Planet Reddit. How would life be different if human beings felt no pleasure from sex? NSFW. I think we'd still have sex, but only for procreation. People would plan their families. There would be far fewer kids in the foster care system, because we would only have sex to make babies. I don't think we'd die out, because there are plenty of people who want children. The problem of a lack of foresight in family planning wouldn't even exist. Damn. We'd all be eugenics proponents. We already are eugenics proponents, just not forced eugenics proponents. Selective breeding is fun stuff. I want to know my kid will have perfect IVs and the best nature before I breed. Much lower risk of STDs. No global population problem really. Society would be radically different, since the sex drive and the pleasure derived from the act infuse every aspect of our culture. Also a lot less teen moms. MTV might not even be a channel anymore. Or they might play music videos again. Nah. Dr. Cameron from House. Sex could kill you. Do you know what the human body goes through when you have sex? Pupils dilate, arteries constrict, core temperature rises, heart races, blood pressure skyrockets, respiration becomes rapid and shallow, the brain fires bursts of electrical impulses from nowhere to nowhere, and secretions spit out of every gland, and the muscles tense and spasm like you're lifting 3 times your body weight. It's violent, it's ugly, and it's messy, and if God hadn't made it unbelievably fun, the human race would have died out eons ago. All that happens in 35 seconds? It stops when you orgasm, not 30 seconds after. Wrecked. We'd probably all be like George from Seinfeld when he stopped having sex, getting ridiculous amounts of things done. That was my first thought, but at the same time, would I want to do anything? What's the end game here? Ferraris. That's the end game. What's the point of a Ferrari if it doesn't get me babes? This is the basis behind the Kurt Vonnegut story. Welcome to the monkey house. If anyone would like to read an interpretation of this idea, to curb the overpopulation, people are required to take a pill that eliminates the pleasure from sex. They refer to it as ethical birth control because people are still allowed to procreate, but they don't because it's not fun anymore. There is also an anime, Shinsekai, which is something similar to this as one of its premises and explores what a lack of sex drive has on sexuality. What happens when sex drive is removed from the act of procreation and is instead used as a way to resolve conflicts and suppress emotions. However, it more uses it as a way to focus on the main theme, which is essentially that misplaced emotions are dangerous to society. Edit. Please refer to u/Aureliano Tampa's comment. I got some things mixed up in regards to the way sex is approached. It is not a lack of sex drive, but rather that sex drive is separate from the act of procreating. If you're going to get into the series, watch the anime. It's very good, and it gets more and more horrific and good as it goes on. Although if I recall, it didn't focus on the lack of sex drive, but explored a future where sex was used to form communal bonds and resolve problems, like bonobos do to an extent. Do not read the manga, unless you just want fat material. It straddles the line between hentai and extreme fan service. Edit. Thinking about it, u/I am Nautilus ask me anything sounds like he's describing The Giver. There are some overlapping themes between the two. Seemingly utopian future with emotional control issues that hides dark secrets, but the views of sexuality are quite different. In The Giver it's something repressed, along with other emotions. In Shinsekai, it's a way to build bonds between members of society and avoid violence or confrontation. Unless you just want fat material, u/Aureliano Tampa forget they air on Reddit. Men, it would probably just solve, like, all of the world's problems. Honestly, yep, it would cause sex to not be a sin, because we wouldn't be doing it for personal pleasure. I think a lot of the Dark Age religious period wouldn't really exist. No one would be burned at the stake for adultery. Adultery wouldn't happen. There wouldn't be a human trafficking market. It'd be amazing what the world would be like if we didn't find sex pleasurable. Physical adultery wouldn't happen, but emotional adultery would still occur, which is usually the precursor to adultery as we know it. The vast majority of people who commit adultery aren't doing it with someone they just met but with someone they've grown a bond with through continued interaction. Which is why it's commonplace to have the other party be a coworker. My estimation is that in a world with no sexual pleasure, adultery would be considered having an emotional, intimate connection to someone other than your spouse. Reading what you wrote makes me realize how weird it is that we care about that stuff. If your spouse has an emotional connection with someone else, so what? Why do we need to feel like we are the only one they are allowed to have a connection with? I don't know. Maybe it's because of the fear that someone we love might leave us for someone they love more, so we become protective and territorial about that person. I think that if sex became purely for procreation, by now we'd have invented ways for machines to do it for us. We've already done that. Well, then we'd actually start using them. Build a baby workshop. The 60s would have a hell of a lot more drug use. I like it. Can you imagine the revolutionary effect of a drug that caused sexual pleasure in a world without it? Ugh me, that's blowing my mind. You must have found my drug. We'd die out like pandas. Pandas are pretty stupid. So are we. Pretty sure we're smarter than pandas. Can't speak for you, of course. This post would be marked safe for work. People would have a lot less sex, since the only reason would be procreation. Then, one day, there would be a genetic abnormality wherein some people found sex slightly enjoyable, because we seek enjoyment. These people would have a lot more sex and procreate faster on average. Eventually, this abnormality would take over and human beings would feel pleasure from sex. Are you suggesting some sort of natural process by which certain traits are selected, causing an entire species to eventually develop said traits? Go figure. Blasphemy. Winner winner chicken dinner. Join our community Discord, link in description. We would be extinct. Our branch on the evolutionary tree would not have gotten very far to begin with. Why is nobody else realizing this? Pleasure of procreation is responsible for early man doing it at all. They were not trying to have kids. They were just following urges and instinct. Edit. Some of you have very narrow definitions of the word pleasure. Satisfaction is easily a form of pleasure. The majority of animals don't derive pleasure from sex. It's just an instinctual compulsion. We would be like that. To quote Nothing Crazy from Farther Down, the pleasure is the instinct. We would have evolved into Vulcans, since the only people who would breed would be those who arrived at a logical reason to have kids. You are wrong. Wikipedia.org link. Dacid Mang. This guy is clearly weak on his law. Everything would be different. People would choose partners on compatibility over looks. There would be less population and nearly all pregnancies would be planned. The world in general would be a different place. There would be no worries about people exposing too much. Sex would become for making babies or a fetish. I feel alcohol and drugs would be used a lot more to get off. Clever people would have a lot more standing in the world than pretty people. Modeling would be more realistic. People would not want to be stick thin anymore, as they would not be seen as healthy to produce babies and such. I could go on so much, but basically everything will be different, as currently the world is addicted to sex and protecting people from it. Why would people suddenly stop caring about looks? They wouldn't. But there wouldn't be a norm the way we think of it. There would be beauty, but detached from sexuality. Human beauty can get surreal, perhaps even more creative. The standard of living would be much better in countries like China and India. Countries? You think we'd have countries? You think Napoleon would give two shits about France if there was no Josephine? Con would have never rucked 1/4 of the planet. Alexander wouldn't have bothered with a wife or a boyfriend. What are these countries you speak of? No desire for sex does not mean no desire for power. Your mother would be broke. My phone bill would be a lot less. A scary small number of humans would exist, then die because there is no reward for reproduction, and we would become extinct. Well, for starters, we might not have graham crackers or cornflakes. Aside from that, I imagine that STDs would probably be nigh non-existent. We'd be down a few subreddits. The internet would be a much smaller place, and the streets in Las Vegas wouldn't look like the back room at a local video store. The Kardashians would be out of business. Rap music would be deep and meaningful. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.